November 7th, 11:43 p.m. A private party in the 6th arrondissement, Paris. The party celebrated French cinema. Directors, actors, critics, the entire industry packed into a historic townhouse, drinking champagne, discussing art. Brigitte Bardot stood near the window, trying to look engaged, while internally counting the minutes until she could leave. These parties exhausted her. The performance, the small talk, the constant awareness of being watched. Across the room, Jeanne Moreau held court, surrounded by admirers, effortlessly magnetic. She was everything Brigitte wasn't. Intellectual, respected, taken seriously as an artist rather than just a beauty. They'd been circling each other all evening, polite nods, careful distance, an unspoken tension between them. Brigitte and Jeanne represented two paths for French actresses. Brigitte was beauty, sex symbol, commercial success, the face on magazine covers worldwide, famous beyond measure. Jeanne was artistry, serious actress, critical darling, respected by filmmakers, famous within cinema, invisible to the masses. The industry constantly compared them. Bardot has beauty. Moreau has talent. One is a star, the other is an artist. Every comparison diminished Brigitte, elevated Jeanne, and both women knew it, felt it, navigated it differently. Brigitte with defensive humor, Jeanne with quiet superiority. At 11:47 p.m., someone introduced a new director to Brigitte. He was effusive, starstruck. "Miss Bardot, I've admired you since and God created woman. You're extraordinary." "Thank you," Brigitte said automatically. "I'm developing a project, very serious, character-driven. I'd love to discuss it with you." Before he could continue, Jeanne Moreau appeared beside them, smiled at the director. "Are you discussing your Chekhov adaptation?" "Yes, I was just telling Miss Bardot." Jane's smile didn't waver. "I thought you were looking for an actress who could handle complex emotional material. My mistake." The implication was clear, delivered with perfect politeness, but devastating. Brigitte can't handle complex material. Brigitte isn't a real actress. The director looked uncomfortable. "I think Miss Bardot is quite capable." "Of course, she's very capable at what she does." Jeanne turned to Brigitte. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sure whatever project he's offering is perfect for you." The condescension was elegant, surgical, wrapped in courtesy, but lethal underneath. Brigitte's face was burning. "Excuse me, I need some air." She walked toward the balcony, away from Jeanne's subtle cruelty, away from the director's pity, away from everyone. But Jeanne followed her. On the balcony, cold November air, Brigitte lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "I apologize if I offended you," Jeanne said from behind her. Brigitte didn't turn around. "No, you don't. You meant every word." "I meant that you and I have different strengths." "That's not an insult. It's an insult when different strengths means I'm beautiful and you're talented. When every comparison is designed to make me feel shallow." Jeanne moved closer. "Do you know what your real problem is, Brigitte? I'm sure you're about to tell me." Jeanne leaned close enough that only Brigitte could hear, and said 5 words. "You believe what they say." Brigitte froze, turned to look at Jeanne. "What? You believe what they say about you? That you're just beauty, just a body, just a commercial product. You've internalized it so completely that you've become it. That's not. You had potential once. I saw, and God created woman. There were moments where you were genuinely interesting, vulnerable, real. Then you disappeared into the product, into Brigitte Bardot the brand. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. I made different choices. I said no to the projects that would have made me a sex symbol. No to the photographers who wanted to objectify me. No to the entire machinery that turns women into products." And yes, Jeanne continued, "It meant less money, less fame, less magazine covers, but I kept myself. I'm still Jeanne. You became Brigitte Bardot. And somewhere along the way, you lost whoever you were before that." Brigitte felt tears threatening. "You don't know anything about my life. I know you're miserable. Everyone knows. You're the most famous woman in France, and you're dying inside. And the tragedy isn't that it happened. The tragedy is that you let it happen. You believed what they said, and now you're stuck being their creation instead of your own person. Someone called from inside. "Jeanne, they're doing a toast." Jeanne turned to go, paused. "I don't say this to be cruel, Brigitte. I say it because someone should tell you the truth. You're wasting yourself, performing a role someone else wrote. And the saddest part? You're so good at performing it that nobody remembers your acting." She walked back inside, leaving Brigitte alone on the balcony, shaking. Those 5 words echoing, "You believe what they say." Brigitte left the party immediately, went home, sat in her dark apartment, replaying the conversation. Was Jeanne right? Had she internalized the industry's narrative so completely that she'd become it? She thought about the decisions she'd made, the roles she'd taken, the image she'd cultivated. How much had been her choice? How much had been accepting what everyone told her she was? You're beautiful. Play beautiful. You're sexy. Play sexy. You're Brigitte Bardot. Be Brigitte Bardot. And somewhere in following those directives, had she lost the ability to be anything else? For 3 weeks, Brigitte couldn't function. She canceled work, stopped seeing people, sat in her apartment, spiraling. You believe what they say. She'd read reviews calling her shallow, vapid, just a pretty face. And she'd hurt. She'd defended herself. But she'd never questioned whether she'd absorbed those critiques, whether she'd started believing them, whether she'd stopped trying to be anything more, because everyone had already decided who she was. Jeanne had seen it, had named it, had exposed the trap Brigitte hadn't realized she was in. Brigitte pulled out old scripts, projects she'd turned down over the years, serious roles, complex characters, the kinds of parts that went to actresses like Jeanne. She'd said no to all of them. Why? Because they weren't Brigitte Bardot roles. Because directors and producers and everyone else had told her, "This isn't right for you. Stick to what you do best." And she'd believed them. She'd believed what they said. Her assistant called, worried. "Brigitte, you've missed 3 days of filming. The studio is threatening legal action. Let them." What's wrong? What happened at that party? Jeanne Moreau told me the truth, and I can't stop thinking about it. What truth? That I've been performing a role for so long I've forgotten I'm acting? That I've let everyone else define who Brigitte Bardot is? And now I don't know who I am without that definition. 3 weeks after the party, Brigitte showed up at Jeanne Moreau's apartment, unannounced. Jane opened the door. Surprised. "Brigitte, I need to talk to you." Jeanne stepped aside, let her in. They sat in Jeanne's small, book-filled living room. So different from Brigitte's luxurious but empty apartment. "You destroyed me," Brigitte said quietly. 3 weeks. I haven't been able to work. Haven't been able to think about anything except what you said. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were right. I do believe what they say. I've spent 9 years accepting other people's definitions of who I am. And I've been so good at performing their version that I've lost my own. Jeanne poured them both wine. I was harsh, too harsh. I wanted to shake you awake, but I didn't consider how painful that awakening would be. Why did you say it? Why did you care? Because it's a waste. You're wasting yourself. I've seen you in moments, brief moments, where the real you shows through the performance. And she's interesting, more interesting than Brigitte Bardot the product. But nobody wants the real me. They want the product. Then give them something else. Say no. Take roles that scare you. Stop performing the version they've decided you are, and show them something different. And if I fail, if I'm terrible at being anything other than Brigitte Bardot, then at least you tried. At least you attempted to define yourself instead of accepting their definition. Brigitte was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I can. I've been Brigitte Bardot for so long. I don't know how to be anything else. That's the lie you've been sold. That Brigitte Bardot is all you can be. But you were someone before that. You can be someone after. Who? That's for you to figure out. Not me. Not directors. Not the industry. You. They talked for 3 hours. About choices. About autonomy. About the different paths available to women in cinema. Jeanne had fought for her path. Said no to everything that would have made her a commodity. It had cost her commercial success, but she'd kept herself. Brigitte had accepted her path, said yes to everything that made her successful. It had brought fame and money, but cost her identity. "Do you regret your choices?" Brigitte asked. "Sometimes, when I see your wealth, your fame, your reach. But then I remember, I still recognize myself in the mirror. I don't think you can say the same." She was right. Brigitte couldn't. Over the following months, Brigitte started changing. Small changes at first, saying no to projects that felt wrong, pushing for different kinds of roles, questioning directors who wanted her to just be Brigitte Bardot. It was harder than she'd imagined. The machinery resisted. Producers complained. Directors got frustrated. "We hired Brigitte Bardot. Why are you trying to be someone else?" "Because I'm tired of being her." But the changes were incremental. The system was too entrenched, and Brigitte was too exhausted to fight it completely. In 1965, Brigitte called Jeanne. "I'm trying, but it's not working. Every time I try to be different, they push me back into the box." "Then leave the box entirely." "What do you mean?" "Retire. Walk away. You have money. You don't need to keep performing their version of you." "But then what do I do? Who am I without Brigitte Bardot?" "Whoever you choose to be. That's the whole point." It took years. But Jeanne's 5 words planted a seed. "You believe what they say." And once Brigitte recognized that truth, that she'd internalized the industry's narrative, she couldn't unsee it. Every role, every interview, every performance. She saw herself accepting their definitions, playing their version, being their creation. And slowly, painfully, she started choosing differently. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough that by 1973, when she retired, it felt like escape rather than defeat. In 1989, a journalist asked Brigitte about Jeanne Moreau. "You've been compared to her throughout your career. Different types of actresses. How do you feel about those comparisons?" "Jeanne is a better actress than I ever was. She chose artistry. I chose commerce. She was right to choose what she chose." "Do you regret your path?" "I regret how long it took me to recognize I was on a path at all. Jeanne saw it before I did, told me about it. It destroyed me for weeks, but it also woke me up." "What did she tell you?" "That I believed what they said about me, that I'd let everyone else define who I was, and that somewhere in that acceptance, I'd lost myself." Was she right? Completely. It took me years to understand how right. By the time I figured it out, it was almost too late. In 2017, after Jeanne Moreau's death, Brigitte gave a rare interview. "Jeanne Moreau once said 5 words to you that destroyed you for weeks. What were they?" Brigitte smiled sadly. "You believe what they say. 5 words that changed my life." How so? Because she was right. I'd spent years accepting everyone else's version of who I was. Sex symbol, beautiful object, commodity. I'd heard it so often I'd started believing it, started performing it, started becoming it. What would you say to her now, if you could? "Thank you for caring enough to be cruel, for telling me the truth when everyone else was telling me comfortable lies, for seeing the person I was disappearing beneath the product they'd created." Do you think she knew how much those 5 words would affect you? Yes. That's why she said them, not to hurt me, but to wake me up. It hurt because it was true, and sometimes the truth is the most painful gift you can give someone. Jeanne Moreau said 5 words to Brigitte Bardot at a party. It destroyed her for weeks. November 1964. A balcony. A cold night. A moment of brutal honesty. "You believe what they say." 5 words that exposed Brigitte's fundamental trap. She'd internalized the industry's narrative, accepted their definition, become their creation. Beauty, sex symbol, product, shallow, just a face. She'd heard it so often, she'd stopped questioning it, started believing it, started performing it so completely that the performance became her reality. And Jeanne saw it, named it, forced Brigitte to see it too. The destruction wasn't immediate. It was slow. Weeks of spiraling, of realizing how much of herself she'd surrendered, how much of her identity, was just other people's projections. But that destruction was necessary. You can't rebuild until you recognize what needs tearing down. Jeanne's 5 words demolished the comfortable lie Brigitte had been living, and in that demolition, created space for something real. It took years. The rebuilding wasn't quick or complete, but it started that night, on a balcony in November 1964, with 5 words that hurt because they were true. You believe what they say. And once Brigitte recognized that truth, she could never unsee it, could never go back to unconsciously performing other people's versions of herself. Jeanne Moreau gave Brigitte Bardot the most painful gift possible, the truth. And though it destroyed her for weeks, it ultimately saved her by showing her the prison she didn't know she was in and suggesting, however cruelly, that escape was possible.